There is a creature that does not exist, has never existed, and yet appears in the mythology of nearly every civilization that has ever lived on Earth. Same claws, same scales, same hoarded treasure, same fire. Cultures separated by oceans, separated by 10,000 years, somehow landed on the same exact monster. Nobody has ever fully explained why, until you start looking at what they were actually digging up. Let's start with the scale of the coincidence, because it's bigger than most people realize. In China, the dragon appears in written records over 6,000 years old. A long, serpentine body, scales, the power to control rivers and rain. In ancient Mesopotamia, around the same era, you get Musushu, a scaled, horned, four-legged dragon-like creature guarding the gates of temples. In Europe, by the medieval period, you get the familiar version: wings, fire, treasure, terrorizing villages. In Mesoamerica, completely cut off from all of them by an entire ocean, you get Quetzalcoatl, a massive feathered serpent worshipped by the Aztec, Maya, and Toltec civilizations for over 1,000 years, powerful enough to be credited with creating humanity itself. In Aboriginal Australian mythology, isolated from all four by oceans and tens of thousands of years, you get the rainbow serpent, a massive snake-like being responsible for shaping the land itself, carving rivers and valleys as it moved across the continent. None of these civilizations had any contact with each other when these myths formed. No trade routes, no shared ancestors recently enough to explain a shared story. And yet the core shape, long body, scales, danger, often guarding something valuable, shows up again and again. That's the puzzle, and there are two real physical explanations that get surprisingly close to solving it. The first one starts in the dirt. For most of human history, people had no concept of extinction and no concept of deep time. They didn't know the Earth was billions of years old. They didn't know entire species could vanish completely. So when a farmer in ancient Greece hit something hard while plowing a field, and what came out of the ground was a skull far too large for any animal he had ever seen alive, he had nothing to compare it to. No framework, no textbook, just a massive bone sitting in his hands that shouldn't exist. Classicist and historian of science Adrienne Mayor has spent decades documenting this exact pattern. Ancient Greeks regularly unearthed the fossilized remains of mammoths, giant prehistoric rhinos, and other extinct megafauna. And they didn't have the luxury of saying, "This is a fossil from 10 million years ago." They built explanations instead. Mayor argues that griffins, the cyclops, and yes, dragons, may have emerged directly from real skeletal remains that ancient peoples found and had to make sense of. In China specifically, there's a documented practice going back centuries of calling fossilized dinosaur bones dragon bones, long jiao gu. They weren't being poetic. They genuinely believed these were the remains of actual dragons, and the bones were ground up and used in traditional medicine. Entire fossil beds in places like Sichuan province were known locally as dragon bone sites, long before any paleontologist ever set foot there. Some are still active dinosaur excavation sites today, discovered because local farmers had been finding dragon bones in the same fields for generations without knowing what they actually were. In North America, Native American oral traditions in regions overlapping the Hell Creek Formation, one of the richest dinosaur fossil beds on Earth, included stories of giant thunderbirds and serpent-like water monsters in territory where Triceratops and Tyrannosaurus remains regularly erode out of the hillsides after heavy rain, even today. So picture it from their side. You find a skull the length of your whole body, teeth the size of your hand, a spine stretching 20 feet through solid rock. You have no concept that this animal lived 70 million years before you were born and has been extinct the entire time humans have existed. The only reasonable conclusion, given what you know, is that something like this is still out there, or was recently enough to leave bones in the ground. That's the first piece. But it doesn't fully explain the fear, because dragon myths aren't just there was a big animal once, they're specifically terrifying. And that part of the puzzle isn't buried in the ground, it's wired into your skull right now. Primatologist Lynne Isbell has spent years researching something called the snake detection theory. The core finding is this: the primate visual system, yours included, is unusually, specifically fast at detecting snake-like shapes, faster than detecting almost anything else in your environment. Isbell's research suggests this isn't a coincidence or a side effect. It's a dedicated evolutionary adaptation. For tens of millions of years, snakes were one of the most consistent predator threats to primates. And the primates who could spot a curved, scaled shape in the grass a half-second faster than everyone else were the ones who survived to pass that trait on. This means the fear isn't cultural. It's not something you learned from a book or a movie. Your brain is doing something specific right now that it has been doing since long before humans existed. Show a group of human children images mixed with a snake shape hidden among other objects, and they will identify the snake faster than any other shape, even children who have never encountered a real snake in their lives. So now you have two separate, very real ingredients: a primate brain hardwired to detect and fear elongated, scaled shapes faster than anything else, and a species that kept digging up the skeletal remains of genuinely enormous extinct animals with no framework to explain them. Put those two things in the same mind, in the same era, anywhere on Earth, and you get the same output. Not because anyone copied anyone else, because the same brain, given the same kind of evidence, tends to reach the same conclusion. This is why the dragon doesn't look like a bear or a deer in mythology. It looks like an amplified snake. Long, scaled, often coiled. The shape that evolution spent millions of years teaching your ancestors to fear before they ever had a word for fear. And then there's the treasure. The hoarding instinct shows up almost everywhere. Norse dragons sleeping on hills of gold, Chinese dragons guarding pearls and rivers, European dragons terrorizing villages specifically to protect a stash. One theory ties this directly to real predator psychology that ancient observers projected onto the myth. Large territorial predators in the natural world, big cats, crocodilians, fiercely defend specific locations, dens, and resources. A creature dangerous enough that nothing could get close to it would naturally become associated, in a storyteller's mind, with whatever it was guarding. The logic writes itself. If nothing can challenge it, whatever it sits on top of must be worth challenging it for. None of this means a dragon, as described in any myth, was ever real. No fire breathing, no flight, no single creature matching every detail across every culture. What was real was the bones. What was real is the fear circuit in your brain right now that responds faster to a curved, scaled shape than to almost anything else you could put in front of it. The myth is not a lie people made up for fun. It's closer to a shared hallucination, built independently by separate groups of humans handed the same two pieces of evidence, ancient terror and impossible bones, with no way to tell each other what they'd found. You inherited the fear, you just never had a reason to use it.